Congress has to agree on funding year after year. There's a budget bill that's talked about incessantly in the news. And sometimes there's a threat to shut down the government if they don't get this bill passed. And whenever that happens, I always think, oh no. Oh no, maybe the bureaucracy won't have all the things that it's doing anymore. I feel personally like the government has gotten really, really big. Sometimes called the fourth branch of government, the bureaucracy. I didn't realize this until I started poking around, but there are 3 million people who work for the federal government, 40,000 who work in Minnesota. Now, that's just the federal government and the state government, but there are 23.6 million people in America that work for the government. That is very, very large. And I'm grateful for those that we need to have government jobs, like those who are involved in prosecuting crimes, arresting people. I'm grateful for that. I'm glad for people that have those kinds of jobs. And I'm even grateful if we have to have a driver's license. I'm glad there's someone at the desk that I can go and talk to and get that. Whether we need one or not, that's a different thing, but there it is. Now, how did it happen that we got such a big bureaucracy? Because remember, the founding fathers didn't seem like that was a great idea. Thomas Jefferson even said, "A wise and frugal government which shall restrain men from injuring one another shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread that it is earned. This is the sum of good government." I think part of the reason why we have such a big government is that we have not regulated ourselves. If you have the freedom to do what's right, then you have also the obligation and responsibility to do what's right. And the truth is that there's all kinds of government laws and agencies we wouldn't need if we just did the right thing, if we would just treat our resources and other people in a good way. The government really is not there to make things better. It's to keep things from getting worse, to varying degrees of success. So I sort of blame churches. I blame Christians. I blame the church for not standing where it should and changing culture like it should. But our government in the U.S. has gotten quite a bit bigger. Lincoln expanded the federal government after the Civil War and even during, just to be able to consolidate more power. But probably it was Franklin Delano Roosevelt who did the most in terms of not only growing the government, but getting people okay with a bigger government. FDR pushed the New Deal that created all kinds of federal agencies called the alphabet soup. The SEC to watch over the stock market, the FDIC to watch over banks. We always look at the FDIC as sort of it's just a nice insurance. You know, if I lose money, then it's great. Well, yes, but there's all kinds of regulations there as well. The AAA paid farmers to not grow anything. Now it's the FSA, but they would actually pay farmers to not grow as much as they could, just to bring prices down, just to put their levers on things that would naturally kind of work themselves out. And again, eventually, and with Social Security. So that now we can't even talk about Social Security because everyone's, every time you mention any kind of changes to it, there's the charge of, well, you hate grandma. You want to kill grandma. Take away Social Security. But the fact is, not to get political, the fact is we're going to have to do something about it. And all of that started, again, with FDR. Not only that, but he also changed the way that Americans thought of government and the president. He consolidated more power and got people just used to the idea that we really want to elect someone who can take power and by executive order just do basically whatever they want. And I'm just, again, not to get political, I just don't like it. FDR threatened the Supreme Court of the United States when they didn't do what he wanted to do, and created the office of a president so he could do more. The president was not meant to be as powerful as he has been, and that is just part of how the government has gotten so big. FDR said, quote, "The liberty of a democracy is not safe if the people tolerate the growth of private power to a point where it becomes stronger than the democratic state itself." And I say, I think it's good that private power is more powerful than the democratic state itself. But that is what FDR was trying to do, was trying to look ahead and try to make changes so that America that he was a part of could be better in the future. And I understand he was dealing with the Great Depression and some pretty corrupt things in government, maybe overcorrected a little bit. Again, I think FDR was misguided, but we appreciate those who have done more for the United States. We want those who are in power to see ahead and see the danger and make provision for it. And so we're at the end of David's life here. We've been going through the life of David since January of last year, and we're just kind of now getting to the end of the passages that talk about David. One of the things that I see that I didn't want to just go over is all of this work at the end of 1 Chronicles, especially 1 Chronicles 22 through the end of the book, all about what David did to set up Israel for success in the future. So we kind of read through it and we're like, yeah, okay, names. But we don't stop to really think about what David was trying to do. What he was trying to do is to say, I'm not going to be around forever. One day I'm going to pass off the scene and somebody else is going to have to carry on. Last week we looked at how he tried to get as much for the temple, the building of the temple, as possible for Solomon, so that Solomon could go ahead and build the temple. But he didn't just do that. He knew that Solomon would be the next king, and he helps him see a way forward. And then he turns his focus to the Levites. Now, I make assumptions on Sunday nights, Wednesday nights, of people that are coming that they kind of know this. I don't always make assumptions on Sunday morning. So let me just give you a little bit of a background of who the Levites were. So there were 12 tribes of Israel, and as they left the promised land, or as they left Egypt and getting ready to go into the promised land, at Mount Sinai, when the golden calf incident came, it was the Levites who stood up and said, we're going to take a stand for God. And God said, the Levites will be my tribe. That will be my people. They will be the ones to represent me. So it was the Levites, and Moses and Aaron were of the Levite tribe. It was the Levites that eventually became sort of the representatives for God. When Israel moved into the land, the Canaan, they were a theocracy. There wasn't a king. There were judges, but mostly it was supposed to be run by God. But you say, well, what did that look like? Did God just like, no, don't do that. No, don't do that. Well, no, he would speak through the law, which was read and interpreted by the Levites. And as you read through, again, passages you maybe skip or don't understand, at the end of Joshua, it says there were 48 cities of the Levites. And if you've ever taken the time, like I have, to map them out, you see they're scattered all over the map, so that you shouldn't be ever very far from a Levite city. There were even 6 cities of refuge, which were kind of hubs for the Levites, and 3 on one side of the Jordan and 3 on the other. And so Levites were scattered all throughout, whereas most people like Judah had a portion in the south, and then Benjamin had a portion just a little above them, where they all had the place where you could find Benjamites or Issacharites or Naphtalites or whatever. The Levites were scattered everywhere, and the idea was that they would represent God, that they would help judge the people, and that they would facilitate worship in the synagogue, or not the synagogue, the tabernacle. Now, the tabernacle was this tent that was made by Moses and the Israelites, and it would travel around. So as you were going through the wilderness, the tabernacle was at the center. All the tribes were all around it. But then as they got into the promised land, everyone's scattered around, and they're not moving anymore, but they still had to find a place to worship. Well, the tabernacle would move around, or it would be at Shiloh. Well, during Eli's day, the people, they were doing so horribly that God said, I'm rejecting Shiloh. And David, you remember, eventually brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, saying, I'd like to build a temple here and have one central place. We talked about that all last week. But what do you do with the Levites? The Levites are still there. David, as a Judahite, couldn't just say, well, now I'm going to take this over. No, it wasn't the will of God for him to do that. So David turns his focus to the Levites and says, let's set this up in a way so that in the future, everything runs smoothly. Everything is going well. So we read about this in 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Now, one other context piece that I want to tell you is that 1st and 2nd Chronicles, it was specifically written to people coming back from the Babylonian captivity. In 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians came in and they destroyed Jerusalem, they destroyed the temple, they took people in exile, but Jeremiah said it's only going to be for 70 years. You read the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, they're coming back to the land. And as they're coming back to the land, these are people largely who have not experienced life under God's rule. They've been living in Babylon. Not that they haven't observed some of the cultural things and some of the dietary laws like Daniel did, but by and large, they're just unaware of what they should be doing. And so 1st and 2nd Chronicles, different from 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles is written to people coming back from exile to say, this is the way it's supposed to be. We're starting over, and let's start over right. This is the way it should be. So as you read that next time, just read through it with those glasses on. That 1st and 2nd Chronicles is really not just a history, but also sort of this is the way things ought to be. So now he talks about how David set up things for the future in Israel, and it's quite detailed. Honestly, I'm not going to read all the chapters. I like to read as much of the passage as possible, but I'm going to go over 4 chapters with a lot of names. And as you look at, tell me more about these people, the Bible says no. That's all you get, this person's name. They were the head of this course. They were the head of this team, whatever, and that's all you get of them. So what lessons can we learn from this? I want to talk to you about preparing for the future. Like David was getting ready for the future, I want to talk to you about that as well. So first of all, there's an assessment of what is there. Looking at 1 Chronicles 23, verse 1, so when David was old and full of days, he made Solomon his son king over Israel. Verse 2, he gathered together all the princes of Israel with the priests and the Levites. Now the Levites were numbered from the age of 30 years and upward, and their number by their polls, man by man, was 38,000. So David counted who he had. Remember, he tried to do the census. That didn't work. He didn't count the Levites. Joab's like, I'm not doing that. But by their own admission, the Levites had 38,000, roughly, people that were going to serve, that were ready to serve, 38,000. He says in verse number 4, of which 24,000 were set forward the work of the house of the Lord, and 6,000 were officers and judges. So 24,000 of them were ready to help in the temple. They were used to the ceremonies, the lavers, everything like that. They had been working in the tabernacle, and they were ready to go. 6,000 were for officers and judges. They were people that knew the law. They were helping enforce the law. They were kind of scattered throughout, and they were people that would help administrate the law. Then in verse 5, moreover, 4,000 were porters, and 4,000 praised the Lord with instruments which I made, said David, to praise therewith. So again, 4,000 were porters. They were people that were crowd control. They would stand at the gates of the cities or help facilitate things. If you went to the tabernacle and you brought your lamb, they would tell you what to do, where to go. They were sort of the ushers or the greeters of the tabernacle. And they were now ready to help in this way. And then there were also 4,000 who were just there to praise and sing and play their instruments, and they were all ready to go. It's worth saying as well that David, I don't think himself made instruments. He probably made some, but he didn't make all the instruments for 4,000 people. He had them made and said, this is important. We want instruments to worship with. The rest of the chapters are what he did, but we start by saying this is what he found. I remember a story as a child, and I found out that it was a European folk story, but it was called Stone Soup. How many of you are familiar with the story of Stone Soup? And it's this idea, these two travelers, they go into town and they want something to eat, and all the people in the town say, no, we're not going to give you something to eat. And so they say, well, can I borrow a pot at least? So they put this pot over this fire right in the kind of the middle of town, and they start this water boiling. And people are saying, what are you doing? And they say, well, we're making stone soup. So they take great pains to look at these stones. And that's a good one. Let's throw that in the pot. And they start throwing all these stones in the pot to make stone soup. And they're like, oh, if you've never had stone soup, it's delicious. And they take a little taste, and they say, oh, it's pretty good, but I could really use some salt and pepper. And somebody says, well, I've got some salt and pepper. I'll come and it'll make it taste a little better, I'll put that in there. So they go and they do that, and they take stir it up, and they say, oh, this is really good stone soup. It would be better if there were some carrots and potatoes, but we don't have any. Everyone in town said they don't have any, and someone says, well, I maybe have some, so I'll bring that out, and they throw that in the pot, and you know how this goes, right? They bring all kinds of other things, and finally there's this wonderful stew that they have, and then everyone in town gets to taste this stone soup. And they all, of course, pretend that the stones are what make it taste good, but what it was everybody coming together, bringing their resources together. And that church, I think about this in terms of, so one of the metaphors that the Bible uses for the church is a body. And I recently preached a message where I was talking about all the connectedness that the body has. How, if you do any kind of study, and some of you, most of your study has come from what your doctor's telling you is wrong, right? But if you ever do any kind of study on how intricately the body is put together, it's an amazing invention that God made. And when you think, we were talking about this earlier, when you think about how different man is from every other animal. I mean, you study animals, and that's an amazing thing in and of itself, just how God created these animals. But you look at the human body and all that we have that's going on there, it's just an amazing thing. And that's the metaphor that God uses for the church, that there's a lot of different body parts and a lot of different things that have functions, and all those are in their place and for their function and made out of the material they're made out of for a reason. And all of that together can do something. So the church has giftings, people that have different abilities. And maybe you come to church and you say, well, I'm glad Pastor Hawn's doing the song leading, because if someone asked me to do that, I would just die on the spot. I just couldn't do that. But there's other things that you do that you're gifted for that other people can't. And as we bring all of our abilities and talents together, we form a more healthy church, a more healthy body, because it takes everyone to be able to do this. So we assess kind of where we are. And my contention as I preach that sermon is that as the body of Christ in our local assembly becomes healthier, that helps all the members become healthier as well. I don't know, how many of you think it would be a really great thing to be a part of a healthy church? How many of you think you could really benefit from a really healthy church? I know there are some people who just kind of dismiss that. I'm not really into organized religion. And I always want to ask, are you into disorganized religion? Because I've been to those too. But just like, wouldn't it be awesome if there was a healthy church where you could go to and you were helped by that? And we all say, absolutely, I think that's so important. Well, the question is, what do we do to make it healthy? What do we do to make it so that it's right where it should be? So you might ask, how can I tell what I have? We're talking about assessing what's there. David says, here are the Levites, here's what we have to work with. How can I tell what I have to work with? Well, do you remember at the beginning of summer, let me just say a few things. At the beginning of summer, I challenged you to say, look at the amount of time that you have. And I know that we're all very busy. And I know in Minnesota, summer days are this precious commodity. In the South, they complain about summer. And here, we're just like little scraps, right? Just any little thing that we can have. And we're thankful for the rain, but we're also like, it'd be nice if we had just more sun. And then the sun comes out and the smoke comes in. And it's like, no. And the thing that kills us is we only get so many of these days. We only get so much of this warmth. So I understand that we're all very, very busy in the summer, but I just asked you to think about your week and the time that you're spending and what you're spending it on. And it's not a very easy thing to assess unless you start writing it down. And I think sometimes when we say, I'm too busy, what we mean to say, which we would never say out loud, is, I don't make that a priority. That's a hard thing for us to say because it's sort of a character defect then. We're saying these things are important, but not as important as this other thing in my life. So I asked you to assess your time and to maybe go out of your way to make more time to worship the Lord or to be a servant of the Lord in various ways. And I won't go through all of those things, but there are some sheets on the back that just kind of enumerate all the things I was encouraging you to do. I encourage you to give out 10 tracts this summer, just 10 tracts. I don't know how you're doing. How many have you passed out so far? Again, it doesn't have to be where you go to door. You can. Wednesday night, we'll meet at 4:30. We'll go door to door. But if that's not, if for whatever reason you're unable to do that, you can give it out when you pay for your gas, when you leave, when you pay your check, when you go and you see someone at the cashier, you give them a tract. It's real easy to do. So that's a real. If we're not doing it, it's not because of time. It's something else. But I asked you to analyze your time. You can also take a spiritual gifts test. And I have some that are really, they seem more complicated than they really are, but it just sort of asks you a series of questions. And then as you go through that, you kind of assess, okay, here are probably the spiritual gifts that the Bible talks about in, for instance, Romans 12, 1 Corinthians 12. Oh, this is where my giftings are. And so that is a way to be able to say, okay, this is where I'm oriented. This is the way I should be and could be serving in the church. And then just ask yourself, what are some things that I enjoy doing? If you enjoy helping people work through their problems and listening, that is a wonderful asset to have in the church body. Well, I enjoy making meals. Well, you might be able to bring that to someone. You might be able to help someone who just has a need, whether they ask for it or not, whether from the pulpit it's being asked for. You just with your Bible time, you might be led by the Holy Spirit to go and do something good for someone else in the church or outside the church. Well, I enjoy teaching others how to do things. Great. There are great needs of teachers in our church as well. Well, I enjoy giving. I want to fund good things. Again, that's a great thing. We need all different kinds of people in the church to do all of the work of the ministry. I would encourage you to pray and have God show you, all right, God, as I think about the future, what do I have? What do I have to offer my church? What do I have to offer the next generation? What are things that you have given me that, Lord, honestly, I'm squandering, but I want to put them to the best use with the time that I have remaining. David looked at the Levites. He said, okay, we got 38,000. And then what did he do? Look at verse number 6. He divided them. It says David divided them into courses among the sons of Levi, namely Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. So Levi, back, Joseph or Jacob's son, Joseph's brother Levi had 3 sons, and through those 3, again, as you look through Numbers, you see kind of all what they did, but those are the 3 sub-tribes of the tribe of Levi. So he divides them on. Now, early on, they didn't have very many Levites or priests, and so they were all very, very busy. And when David numbered the people, he found that there were 1.4 million people living in Israel at this time. That's a lot of people, especially on the Passover, which is only one day of the year. And 1.4 million people with their families are bringing sheep and bulls and goats at any particular time, but especially on the Passover, they're bringing their sheep to be killed. And you just imagine what kind of chaos that was on Passover days, on feast days. And so what they did is they would just call in all these other Levites and say, well, we have to have help here. But sometimes the message didn't get there. Sometimes you didn't know. And so, again, very, very complex. And so look at chapter 23, verse 24. It says, these were the sons of Levi after the house of their fathers, even the chief of the fathers, as they were counted by number of names by their polls, that did the work for the service of the house of the Lord from age of 20 years and upward. For David said, the Lord God of Israel hath given rest unto his people, that they may dwell in Jerusalem forever. And also unto the Levites, they shall no more carry the tabernacle, nor any vessels of it for the service thereof. For by the last words of David, the Levites were numbered from 20 years old and above. Now, what do you need the Levites to do? Oh, what was he asking them to do? Well, look at verse 28. Because their office was to wait on the sons of Aaron, those are the high priests, for the service of the house of the Lord in the courts and in the chambers and in the purifying of all the holy things and the work of the service of the house of God. There was a lot of water. There was a lot of wood. And they had to get wood to stoke the fire. They had to get water for cleansing. And so if you were a Levite, you maybe just had to go, and your time there was just going to the well, getting a bucket of water, bringing it back, putting it in the lavers. Or your job as a Levite was to go out into the woods with an axe, cut down a tree, hack it up, bring that tree back. Maybe, you got a crew of people, and they're just putting wood under the altar so that it stays going. Right? And that's your job. Or you might be the one who's going to go and purify and clean this thing. Because you can imagine 1.4 million people, there's going to be a lot of blood on the ground. I mean, it's a really disgusting thing to think about. Thankful for the blood of Christ. One of the things I'm really thankful for is that we don't have to sacrifice animals. I mean, we're going to have Warnicks come in and clean our carpet at some point. Can you imagine if we had to clean up blood stains? Or we just had tile in here. That'd be awful. I'm glad we don't have to do all that. But you think somebody had to do that. Somebody had to clean all that up. Somebody had to go and make sure that everything was running right. And so some of the Levites weren't doing like the most out there, this is a godly man kind of thing. They were just doing things around the tabernacle and the temple. Not only that, but look at verse 29. Both for the showbread and for the fine flour for meat offering and for the unleavened cakes and for that which is baked in the pan and for that which is fried and for all manner of measure and size. You had some Levites, their job was to bake bread. They would just, because every day you had to put bread out as service to the Lord. You put it on the table of showbread, and every day you'd go and do that, and then you'd take it out, and then there'd be more bread. And it would just be the same thing, just bread every day. And you had to use fine flour. Sometimes you'd get donations of flour, and you had to grind that up a little bit more. So there was always, you had to go get oil. You had to go make sure that wherever the oil was, you had to go get it and make sure there was a store of it. So there was that. Verse 30, and to stand every morning to thank and praise the Lord, and likewise at even. This is the singers. They would go, and as you went into the tabernacle temple, there would be people there singing and praising the Lord all day. I don't know if they took shifts or what. I was thinking about the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier this week, and just, man, I'm impressed. If you've never gone to see that, you should go and see the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. But I could never do it. I mean, one, it would be very, very boring to me. And I would be so afraid of making a mistake. There's such discipline in all the steps that they take and the way that they turn. Everything is so regimented. If you went to see it once and you went to see it again, it would be the exact same. That's the impressive part, right? I just couldn't do that. But here are these guys, and I was thinking about the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier and thinking, like, how long do they go? Do they go for an hour at a time or 2 hours? Probably Google knows. I just didn't bother to look it up. But I was looking at that don't right now. I know there's a rabbit. Don't go chase it, please. I know you want to. Right after the sermon, you can. But just imagine going and you have to sing for an hour. You have to sing for half a day. Like, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. I get tired just leading singing here. And there were people that was their job. Verse 31, and to offer all burnt sacrifices unto the Lord in the Sabbaths and in the new moons and in the set feasts by number according to the order commanded unto them continually before the Lord, and that they should keep the charge of the tabernacle and the congregation, and of the charge of the holy place, and the charge of the sons of Aaron, their brethren, in the service of the house of the Lord. There were, again, offering sacrifices, and especially on feast days. This was a major, major undertaking. When we think about the temple, we think, oh, yeah, well, it was this thing that just kind of went. No, it didn't just go. It took a lot of people doing their job. And David said, I want to make sure that this is as set up as possible. I'm going to find the people that can do this and do this and do this, and we're going to organize them into courses. I'll talk about what that means in a little bit. But something like that was a major undertaking. And sometimes we have projects we look at and we say, I just don't know where to start. You know, today's the day I'm going to go clean my garage. And you open the garage doors and you look at it and you just close the garage doors. And you're like, you know what? Next Saturday, I'm going to do that. You know, I go into my office. I'm like, I'm going to clean my desk today. And what I mean is I'm going to put this piece of paper away in this file. It just seems so overwhelming. You look at your pantry and you say, I know that there's a better way to store all this stuff, and I just can't deal with this right now. You go to your storage unit, you open the door, and you just think, do I even need all this stuff? And then by the end, you throw one thing away, and you say, okay, I'm just not ready to do this. Best practice is just to divide all of that up into smaller, more manageable tasks. You know, I'm just going to organize this and then quit for the day. I'm going to make these piles the keep, the throw, the undecided, and then we'll deal with it there. David's looking at these Levites and he says, let's organize them. Yeah, this is a big thing, but let's just break it down into smaller units so that they know exactly what they're doing. Why? I think just to make sure that everything was getting done and that nothing was being missed. Who's going to praise today? They had an answer. Who's supposed to be singing here at the gates? They had an answer. Who's supposed to go make the bread? Well, it's Shemaliah, you know, it's Jehiel, it's somebody else that's supposed to go and do these things. You laugh at me, but those are actual names that I studied this week, things that I'm not reading through. These are people that they know exactly who's going to do it, when they're going to be there. Everyone knows, hey, next month. So we talked about John the Baptist this morning in Sunday school, and Zacharias was there. Why? Because he was of the course of Abiah. How many, 1,000 years later, they're still like, yep, I'm in the course of Abiah. I know that this month, Nisan is when I'm supposed to be there, so I'm going to go, and I'm going to offer it, you know, and then you get there, and you draw lots, and okay, Zacharias, you're up. You get to go and burn the incense there, and so he gets to do that. But he knew exactly when he was going to be there. Just organizing it and structuring it. Why? So that it would continue. Have you ever had some kind of project where it wasn't very well organized and it just kind of fizzles? Just, if you say, I'm going to build this, but you don't have a plan, it's not going to get built. If you have this thing that's going to get cleaned, but you don't have a plan, it's not going to get cleaned. David says, I got to make sure that we're prepared for the future, that this is the way it's going to be. There's an intention because of work that is done prior. And as you prepare for your future, I want to just have you consider the future of First Baptist Church. We looked earlier in the summer at 135 years of being in Park Rapids. This church has been around for 135 years. And that's not to credit anyone in this church right now, right? Because there's a lot of years that came before us. And even if there was someone who was 100 years old, who was there, from the very, their parents were there from the very, very beginning, it wouldn't be credit to them either. It's all God. It's all the Lord's work. And we're grateful for that. We intend for this church to be a blessing to you and to others. We want to be a lighthouse in our community. We want to continue to be that. And it takes some sacrifice and it takes some giving to make sure that when the Lord comes back, there's still a First Baptist Church of Park Rapids. And again, I think about that not because I'm the pastor, but because I love this church. I've been a member here now for 20 years. And got married in the church. Amy's been here longer than that. And we love this church. I'm the pastor, not because this is my job, but because I love this church. And I want this church to continue. And I want this church to continue to be a blessing to people. I want people to be saved. I want to run into people in town that said, I got saved at that church. Or you preached a message and I got saved. And now I'm going to a different church, but at least I got saved. There's something where we're doing something for the Lord. That doesn't happen by accident. We need some people who are just kind of attending, we need you to join. And when you join, you're saying, I'm committing myself to this church. I'm going to be as involved as I can. I'm going to come to as many services as I can. And I know you can't come to every single service. I get that. But I'm going to be involved. I'm going to get to know people's names. I'm going to find out what my giftings are so I can help serve in this church. I want to come. I would love for everyone who's here now to come tonight and Wednesday nights and Sunday school. I would love for that to happen. And I know that it's probably not going to happen. But I'm glad I want you to get as much out of this as possible. I'd love for everyone to come, all the members especially, to come to our business meetings and to care about what's going on in the church and to pray about and to say, hey, Pastor Hawn, I've been thinking about this, and this is a ministry I think we ought to do. I'm ready to take this. I was so blessed by Kelly earlier this summer to say, I have a real burden for kids in our area. You don't have to do anything, Pastor Hawn, just pray for us, but I'm going to take some people from the church and we're going to go do this kids ministry here in town. And I think that is great. Why? Because it's like ensuring that things are going to be done and that we're going to move on and that we're making a difference in our community. So as you consider the future, just, again, organize what kind of legacy you're going to have. Can I say, as a pastor, well, I mean, you've done this too, haven't you? You've gone to a funeral, and there's just not that much to say about what the person did with their life. We talk about hobbies, but those hobbies didn't really mean a lot. I mean, you don't have people there because they made a big difference in their lives. Your people are there to pay respects maybe because the spouse was important or something, but I want to, when I die and when whoever does my funeral, I want them to be able to point to things that I've done to make a difference in this life. I think every single person, especially Gen Z, they say, I don't want to go out of this world and not made any difference at all or made a difference to only a handful of people. I'm not looking to be famous. If we have a YouTube channel, and if that blows up, I would be horrified by that, because I'm not preaching to the world. I'm preaching to you. I know that I just want to make a difference here in Park Rapids, but I want to make a difference in Park Rapids. I want to make a difference in this area. I don't want to just kind of go through life and preach my little sermons and we sing our songs and we go and sometimes it just becomes so rote because we don't think about the future and what's going to happen and what this church could be, should be, needs to be, not only for our own health, but for the future. I'm asking you to pray about what we can do to make sure that this church goes on. You're like, Pastor, do you know anything that's going on? No, I don't. I don't want to preach in a dry tree. I want to preach in a green tree. I want to preach when we have something that we don't have to address the major issue. Things are going great. Giving is great. I don't have to oh no, these whole horrible things are going on. No, I just want to say, let's think about the future and say, what can we as a church do to make sure that we are making the difference that Christ wants us to make in this community. And that is not just my job. I'm glad to be the leader, and I'm glad to be the overseer, and I'm glad to offer things, and I'm glad that when I say, let's do this, the church family says, yes, we're behind you. I appreciate that. I'm not denigrating that at all. I'm just saying, I bet that the Lord, that's not the right phrase, I wonder if the Lord has things that he wants to do in and through you where you are. You have a part of this kingdom as well. Then I see, finally, a charging of what needs to be done. So these Levites are divided by what needed to be done. Go over to chapter 24, if you would. Chapter 24, look at verse number, so there's a lot of names, and then we get to verse 19. These were the orderings of them and their service to come into the house of the Lord according to their manner, under Aaron their father, as the Lord God of Israel had commanded him. So these are people that would serve in the temple. And again, I'm just going right over the names, apologize. But I did a lot of study on this week, and I'm kind of picking out the things that I think are going to be the most, where we're not just talking about people that we don't know anything about. But the names that were mentioned earlier, those were people that were in the service to come into the house of the Lord. Then look at chapter 25, verse number 1. Moreover, David and the captains of the host separated to the service of the sons of Asaph and of Heman and of Jeduthun, who should prophesy with harps and with psalteries and with cymbals. The number of the workmen according to their service was, and then it goes through all these people that were ordered to prophesy and sing and give thanks and play harps. As you look through this list, it just says these are people that were going to play harps in the temple. Look at verse number 5. All these were the sons of Heman, the king's seer, in the words of God to lift up the horn. And God gave to Heman 14 sons and 3 daughters. All these were under the hands of their father for song in the house of the Lord, with cymbals, psalteries, and harps for the service of the house of God, according to the king's order, to Asaph, Jeduthun, and Heman. So the number of them with their brethren that were instructed in the songs of the Lord, even all that were cunning, was 268. And they cast lots, ward against ward, as well as the small and the great, the teacher as the scholar. And then it goes through and says, here's the first lot, 12. There's 24 different lots, 12 of them. 12 people would show up, and they were going to serve in this way. 288, they were just in charge of the music there. And he said, I want this to happen in this way. Look at chapter 26. Concerning the divisions of the porters, of the Korites was Meshelemiah, the son of Kor, of the sons of Asaph. So these are people to watch over certain gates. And look at verse number 13 here in chapter 26. They cast lots, as well as the small as the great, according to the house of their fathers, for every gate. Verse 15, to Obed-Edom, southward, and to his sons of the house of Asuppam. Look at verse number 17. Eastward were 6 Levites, northward 4 a day, southward 4 a day, and toward Asuppam 2 and 2. And again, we just kind of skip over these, but think about it. Someone needs to be watching the gates. Someone needs to be there to help people to know what to do. Someone has to be that friendly face when you come into the temple. Chapter 26, verse 20. And the Levites, Ahijah was over the treasures of the house of God and over the treasures of dedicated things. He talks about someone who could watch over and receive the treasures that were coming in. Look at verse 29. Of the Izharites, Chaniah and his sons were for the outward business over Israel, for officers and judges. They were sort of like the police department. Everywhere throughout the whole country, the officers and judges, it was the Levites who would go and enforce the law and say, hey, the law says that you stole this, you're going to have to restore that fourfold. Or the law says that you struck your servant and he lost a tooth, now you have to let him free. That's the way the law went, right? So there's Levites that were enforcing all of this. You had some who were the enforcers, some who were the singers. Everybody had some kind of part. This is one of those things that I realized as we were building our house over the last year, just that everyone has kind of a specialty and everyone has the thing that they're doing. You don't generally have people that know how to do a lot of things. Like the drywallers don't do the plumbing and the excavators don't do any wiring. Now, sometimes plumbers have to do some drywalling. Sometimes they have to do some cement work, things like that, if there's something that's forgotten. But generally, you have one person who's doing that one thing. And in the church, there are people who are well-suited to help and make a difference. Honestly, if you're here by design of the Lord. I know you chose to come, but also God had you here. I'm always grateful for the people that God puts into our church. A little while ago, like when Al Henderson left, I thought, what are we going to do? Al was our treasurer. He was our piano player. He was one of the deacons. And just, such an encouragement. Al, if you're watching, I just love you. I miss you. But I was worried, like, what's going to happen? What are we going to do? And the Lord, we started praying. Lord, would you send some people who could play piano? Would you send some people who can help with the finances? Lord, would you send some people who can minister in these other areas? And God did. I'm always grateful for the people that God brings into the church. And if someone decides I'm not going to be a part of this church anymore, I take that from the Lord as well. I go after them. If there's anything I can do, I will. But I just take it as the Lord is the one bringing people in and taking people out. And that God, I'm not trying to say just laissez, whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm just saying God's the one that puts the church together. And so sometimes it's good for us just to pray through that and say, God, we need more people like this. Or God, we need this kind of thing. And I'm doing a lot more praying about that. Because I realize that it's God that does that. I don't know when we knock on someone's door, they get saved. Maybe they're going to be the next song leader. They're going to be a deacon in years. I don't know. That's not my intention. I just want to be faithful to the Lord and do what we can do. So in your own preparation, just to think about, what can I do to help this church grow? What can I do to help this church be more healthy? I know I'm not asking you to do things that you absolutely cannot do. There's a gifting there. And sometimes we work in our giftings and sometimes we work out of our giftings. That's one of the things about VBS that I love is all the people that know how to do this and that, they go do those things. And if someone isn't a good fit or they just don't feel like that's really their thing, we try to find the thing that is their thing so that they can do it. And I'm grateful. I'm never more impressed with the body analogy than something like a VBS where everyone's doing the thing that's in their strength. I think it's wonderful to work in your strength. Sometimes you have to work outside of it. I'm not saying don't. But I'm just saying there are a lot of things that we as a church could be doing, should be doing, and we're just not yet. Maybe we need to pray that some people would come in to the church, maybe move here and join. Maybe it's just that we need to pray that people would find their niche and their giftings and be able to serve. But as the church gets older, as we in the church get older, younger people are coming in, people are moving in, moving away. The church always looks different. You're away from the church for just a little while, you come back and it's like, wow, everything looks so different. And I appreciate that. I think it's an okay thing to acknowledge, but it's also, what is God doing in all of that? And that's the question I'm always asking. So what kind of people is God looking for? Well, we have, again, what we mentioned, people that were serving in the temple. Those are people that can persevere. Those are people that are patient. Those are people that are not going to get offended easily, people that are just going to say, this is my job in the church, and I'm going to just continue with that. We have people that are praisers. Now, you think about people that praised and learn instruments. So how many of you have ever learned an instrument before? I'm not asking you to join the orchestra. I'm just saying in the past somewhere you learned some instrument. It's a hard work, isn't it? It's a lot of self-discipline. I had to learn the clarinet, and it was really tough. All that practicing I had to do, it was a lot of self-discipline lessons and everything. And I've tried taking piano lessons, and I just realized, like, my brain cannot do two things at once. I just can't. I'm just not wired for it. And maybe if I practiced more, I could, but so I just appreciate the self-discipline, and especially back then when their instruments were pretty just kind of crude, right? There wasn't a lot to them like there are today. There isn't like music notes that you can follow. They just had to practice and be self-disciplined. And we need people in the church that can be self-disciplined, who can learn how to do some things. The porters were people that were aware and discerning, people who can watch out for our church, people who can be a friendly face in our church. Maybe you're going to be a porter. You're going to be someone who's just, I'm going to make it my mission to make sure that people that are coming in feel welcome and know that this is a friendly church, and maybe I'll have a chance to give them the gospel, but at least I want them to I'm going to do my part to try to come back. Then you have the overseers of the treasurers, people that are have integrity and trustworthiness. We need people that can be trusted with the things that we're doing in the church, with the finances and other things, and I'm grateful for the people that we have. Then we have a judge or an overseer, someone who's wise and just, someone who's able to keep the peace. David was finding these people to do what they were already doing, but just to organize them and say, okay, now we're going to have it where in this month you come, in this month you come. It's all organized by families. Why? Because he said to himself, this isn't going to just happen. Solomon's going to build the temple and everyone just is going to know what they're supposed to do. No, we have to organize it. And as we think about preparations and as we think about the future and as you think about the rest of your life, however long you have, what can you do to increase and to perpetuate that legacy that you have already, the things that we're doing here in this church, again, specifically here.